Hello guys, Colin here. If you've ever used single coil pickups, you'll probably have noticed that some of them have staggered pole pieces while others have pole pieces that are all the same height. And if you've ever gone to buy single coils online, you'll very likely have been confronted with that option. So, what's the deal? What should you choose, and is there a difference? In the height of single coil popularity in the 50s and 60s, electric guitars were different in a few ways than most modern guitars are now. The difference that's most relevant to the topic at hand is the fretboard radius. All fretboards have some form of curvature, and we refer to that curvature by the radius a circle would have to be if the fretboard were part of its circumference. On early Stratocasters, this radius was typically 7¼ inches, which is quite a pronounced radius. Today, modern guitars have a much flatter, larger radius, 12 inches being quite common. A steep radius meant that the strings would also have to be positioned in a high arc to prevent the middle strings from bottoming out on the frets. Having a totally flat pickup would mean the D and G strings sat considerably further away from the pickup than the outer E strings. A string's proximity to the magnetic pole piece is a large part of how loud that string will sound when amplified. The closer a string is to the pole piece, the louder its signal will be. So to ensure that all the strings had the same output, the pole pieces were adjusted so that they were equidistant from the strings set up on a 7¼ inch radius board. But that's only part of the story. If you look at a vintage staggered pickup, you'll notice that the pole pieces aren't at all symmetrical, as my previous explanation would imply. This is because the 6 strings on a guitar aren't the same as one another. Some are wound and some are plain, and obviously they're all different thicknesses, and at pitch they've got different tension applied to them. All those factors mean that some strings will sing louder than others. Thin, unwound strings have a higher perceived volume than the thick, wound ones, for example, with a B being particularly overpowering. So staggering was taken further to reduce the height of the B and E pole pieces initially. Another difference in old guitars was the strings. Wound G strings used to be very popular, and some exceedingly handsome YouTube personalities wish they had remained so. So early single coils had a tall G pole piece to match the strings used. When unwound G strings became more popular, the staggered pickups were changed again to include a lower G pole piece to now match the louder unwound string. For the time period, this was all very important. Music being made on guitars was largely chordal and played through clean amps with very little effects to speak of. Without things like compressors and distortion to normalise the small level differences between strings, it would have been very easy for a pickup with incorrect pole piece staggering to have some strings that were overpowering others when playing those lovely clean chords. Today, pole piece staggering is much less of an issue. Modern guitars with flatter fretboard radiuses don't require staggered pole pieces to get a balanced output from their pickups, and with the advance in effects and playing styles, it's likely that most players wouldn't even notice some strings being quieter than others anyway. So the rule of thumb is the steeper the radius of your fretboard, the more likely you are to want staggered pole pieces. But does that mean if you don't have a vintage guitar you shouldn't use staggered poles? Well, like anything in this game, sometimes breaking the rules can work to your advantage. While there will be some differences in output level with staggered pole pieces, they do have a different tonal character to flat poles due to the difference in distribution of the magnetic field in relation to the coil, so you might find you like that sound more. And flat poles can work perfectly well on a steeper radius board. In fact, all the original Telecasters had flat pole pickups and only changed to staggered poles years later. And how many times have you heard someone complain that the original Telecasters had a crap tone? Now, I've been talking specifically about single coils this whole time, where the height of the pole piece is set by the physical size of the magnet, but you can and should apply all this knowledge to the adjustable screw pole pieces in humbuckers and P90s. Tweaking those screws to match your fretboard radius and the type of strings you're using can really help get the best out of your instrument, and if you mess it up, it's easy to adjust it back to where you had it before. So there we have it. Hopefully that has demystified the staggered pole pieces for you. If you've still got questions, then please do leave them in the comment section below and I'll do my best to answer them. If you like this video and you want to see more content that's like this, then you can hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified of all my new content as it comes out. My Patreon's also there for exclusive secret stuff if you wish to support me on that, and there's other videos you might not have seen. But that's all for just now, guys. Keep it loud and I'll see you later. Yeah.